And we're live.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. We'll call this meeting to order, which should be our last meeting of the Efficiency Committee. We don't have anybody joining us from the public today, other than whoever might be online. Should we do a roll call? Ernesto, you want to start?
Ernesto is here.
Kathy Gordon.
Bryce Peterson.
Brian Johnston.
Todd Granito.
Eric Chris.
Ryan Dexter.
Michael Gay.
Brian Moore. Josh Eggleston.
And Carly Weinenbach.
Okay, thanks, gang. First time in business is entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. I think then our primary and almost only item of business is to have a motion. Hi, Mayor. Welcome. We're glad to have you. We'll acknowledge for the record that Mayor Hoy is here. Mayor, do you have anything you'd like to ask or share?
Just gratitude. Thank you for doing this and being here. I appreciate the sacrifice.
Thanks for the chance. We have it could be a pretty quick meeting. We'll see how much debate there is, but we have a letter that was circulated to summarize our recommendations and findings. Hopefully everybody had a chance to take a look at it. I know there were some red lines. I did review the red lines that came out in the additions agenda. So ultimately, we just need to have a motion on the letter once we're considered that it's the right thing. But first, any discussion?
I had a couple questions on this findings regarding the city manager's office. The city manager's office ratio of full-time employees for 10,000 is 0.34, and the average of its peers is 1.38. That's just like the city manager. He had 6, and the peer would be 31, or the average, yeah. So the peer ratio would be 31. It seems
So I think that was pulled
like
from
apples to
the
oranges.
Lots Adams report.
yeah.
And
Doesn't it seem weird though that we have 6 and the peer would be 31?
Might just be how it's structured. I know.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah,
Communications and comms.
Something's got to be off on that one because
Yeah, others could stack legal in there and communications.
HR,
Mm,
IT, or yeah,
Yeah.
it just feels like something that's
Probably the notable changes, communications generally has quite a few more staffing, and sometimes there's additional like policy advisor type positions, that we don't have. I don't know.
just don't know if that's worth including in there since it's such a dramatic.
I would I would not exclude it.
Items.
I think it's
Most
actually a
items
really
would
telling.
Okay,
be
From
careful
my
what
perspective,
you-
it's a
even though
very
we don't really
telling.
know how.
Well, I mean,
Apples to-
I wouldn't. While we may not know exactly, the reality is the city manager's office has 6 employees. And the city manager's office of other
Yeah.
Cities
Yeah, yeah,
has
peers.
considerably more. However, they choose to structure that in their cities.
Yeah.
The reality is all of the recommendations and findings of the Moss Adams report are based on,
Should be peers.
right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
while I can't explain all the distinctions between that or why there's such a disparity, they didn't make any like, yeah, but City of Salem is different in this way, so we're gonna put an asterisk next to that 0.34.
I'd be a little surprised if Moss Adams didn't take it.
They should, but
I would agree.
So
Like, I would not be very inclined to
dismiss it or.
dismiss
Yeah.
it, because I would think that they would have taken that into consideration. Without better,
So just for clarity, they compared us to Beaverton, Bend, Eugene, Hillsborough, Gresham, Medford, and those are 10, 17, 17, 29.5, 11, and 6. Comparable staffing.
Yeah,
Hillsborough
but
had
that's not 31.
but it's per 10,000.
Okay.
Like the 0.34 is a
Yeah.
ratio.
That's, yeah.
So Hillsborough is high, 29.5. I'd be curious what's included there. And then Bend and Eugene at 17. I mean, I think the data is correct, and Moss Adams is very good about making sure they're sourcing correctly.
Yeah,
There could be different scopes within that Hillsborough number, that seems.
okay.
I think it's just structure.
Yeah.
Frankly,
Well, I think regardless of
Mhm.
what numbers are, we are concluding here that City of Salem Manager's Office is very efficient in terms of FTE per population. And there's outliers, but this is our conclusion.
With some potential inefficiencies
Yes.
as a result of not having enough.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Exactly.
So if I may, so most of these other cities have communication team as part of the city manager's office. And we do not have, we have one person that is communication for the city manager's office. I think that also is considered.
Which was one of their big
Mhm.
conclusions is the glaring omission of that, right? By the way, I should recognize, for the record, Krishna is here, deputy city manager, or interim. city
Acting,
manager,
interim.
acting.
I don't know what that's-
Thank you for being here.
One thing that I wanted to advance on is number 7, leveraging Moss Adams recommendations and action efficiencies, which I think is a really good point. And obviously the city identifies the value of having performance audits. Last week when the chief was here, I asked him how much they were paying Moss Adams, and it sounds like it's about $250,000. And so I'd like us to consider whether or not we want to make a recommendation to bring an internal auditor on staff.
If I may, just for context, so you are correct, the total contractor record amount is 350,000. The amount allocated for the performance assessment, I believe, is around 75,000 annually, so it's not that full scope of that work. There's other things built into there, like the city council retreat function, leadership chamber retreat function, other analyses that are happening in other works. But that the 350 is the maximum, but the amount allocated for the performance assessment, I believe, is around 75,000
For all of them?
All three?
For all the assessments?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the way we're structuring it, so the finance committee is directing that work. They've selected the first 3 for the current year. We expect to go to them around June, July to pick what's coming up next, to use the allocation from next fiscal year, assuming it's still there.
Yeah, and we also benefit from a wide breadth of knowledge and expertise in a firm like Moss Adams that one person likely wouldn't have. So they have a lot of different resources that they can tap into to explore different areas.
So if I might kind of add to Callie's point, I think we did every year we look at, is there a possibility for us to get like full-time FTEs to kind of do that similar work and how much it is going to cost the city versus using Moss Adams? And to kind of add to what Callie was saying, because of the breadth of knowledge that and the depth of knowledge that we bring in each of those areas, it is going to take us more than that dollar amount to get full-time FTEs to get the work done. And that's kind of our analysis every year, so we do kind of look at.
Yeah, and just to speak to the internal audit function, I think in the ideal world, that would be something that exists. I think there's value in there, but in our current capacity, to try to find an internal auditor with a level of expertise in everything the city does is a challenge. So my experience with Moss Adams is, they have different point people on different studies because of that expertise. So I find extreme value from what Moss Adams can bring to the table with their breadth across, lots of different areas.
One question is the city required by law to conduct these audits? Because what I've heard over several years is it looks like we study a lot and we pay consultants for studies at the time where city doesn't have money to conduct its operations. So how necessary are all these audits and consulting engagements?
I think there's definitely a balance, right? For sure. If we didn't if we didn't conduct them externally, I know there's not capacity internally to conduct them, so they just wouldn't happen.
But for example, what's the benefit? Do we have tangible monetary benefit from Moss Adams report? I frankly don't see it.
I mean, part of the challenge, aren't the audits driven kind of by the same impetus that brings us here? I mean, this to kind of show.
But we are free.
Good use.
We are free.
Sure, but I think probably a different level of scrutiny that's happening for Moss Adams versus us. I just think there's probably value in audits to demonstrate to the public that there's some kind of outside review and an eye towards efficiency, looking at what the city's doing.
So if I don't have money to pay my mortgage, I don't invite housekeepers to clean the house. That's my point.
I can speak specifically to a couple assessments they did in my area. So they did an internal control review, and they also did a purchasing process review. And I found those valuable. They kind of set the stage for actions we're going to put in place over the next few years. At the same time, that is something, I didn't actually ask for them, but they happened regardless. So it is kind of a balance of what is the community council asking for? And we don't know at this point if we'll include that contract amount in next year's budget, as a proposal.
I just think when you have someone internally that's solely dedicated to internal audits, they can go at a deeper level. And they can also look at more things than just 3 isolated areas too.
And they can help with implementation.
And-
I think that's one of the challenges with outsiders, that they leave a report and then they
Yeah.
remove
Yeah.
themselves from the work.
Is there any follow-up that Moss Adams does? 3 months, 6 months, 9 months?
I mean, there could be. We haven't, for the other assessments, they've been kind of one-off. So this is the first 3 that have kind of been part of this ongoing cycle where we have the intention of continuing it. So we certainly intend to report back to the finance committee on progress.
So just kind of as an example, they did do the work for the IT governance like a few years ago. And they gave us a recommendation, a setup, and how we could kind of proceed with that. And that is for the IT department to be more efficient with the projects and the type of work that we do and all that. So what the flexibility we have is we can always kind of follow up with them on that, even though the work is done. We do kind of check on, hey, this is kind of how it's working. Is there a possibility for us to improve further on this? So we have that flexibility with them for the kind of for the work that we do. Right now, we have the IT audit scheduled as part of the performance audit. Having that background, the fact that they did the internal services audit and they did the IT governance, it kind of gives the context to move forward with the audit with all that knowledge, right? So there is much bigger scope for the broader scope for the type of projects that they kind of help us out with.
In the interest of time, this discussion started, Ryan, with your question about whether or not we should consider a recommendation in the letter about an internal auditor. We could, I guess there are options there. We could make an assertive recommendation that it should be done. We could omit it, not change it, or we could do something in the middle, which is encourage the consideration of one.
And I think that's where I would recommend is, ongoing performance audits with the consideration at some point to bring that function in-house, be able to get to a deeper level to identify other possible efficiencies. That's where I struggle a little bit with the letter, and I'm comfortable with it, but just making a blanket statement that we feel that the city is being led efficiently. I think by the information that we received, I would concur with that. But we scratched the surface.
Mhm, mhm.
And a lot of it was based on conversations with high level management without getting to a deeper level, looking at individual contracts and resource allocation that really you need to have, someone like Moss Adams or a dedicated internal resource that has the ability to get to that level to really consider whether or not there are actual efficiencies that could be identified. So I think you could just expand that number 7 to address that.
So you have a little bit of 2 points there. One, I think wanting to make clear that our review was only as deep as it could be in the time that we had, which wasn't super, super deep, right? I don't know if it was you who added that paragraph there. Does that, I like that addition. Does that achieve that part of your concern? Okay, because I really do. There's a red line.
Process.
And I
Yeah.
think that's a great
Yeah.
addition. And then in terms of 7, what I hear you suggesting is essentially 2 things, maybe not so much, well, yeah, you said both. One, make sure these are ongoing at a level that can really dig deeper than we were able to. Right. And then 2, I agree with the sentiment about these can just be shelved and
Right.
often are.
Right.
And we just don't want that outcome. If the resources are going to be spent on having somebody do this, let's make sure that we leverage the work. That doesn't mean that everything they
Right.
recommended is
Right.
the right thing to do, but let's at least make sure we don't just spend a ton of money on a report and then not do anything about it.
When I think to Ernesto's point too, we get all the reports, the findings and stuff back. Do we even have the people and the resources to make the changes and do things about
Yes.
it? It sounds like it's already spread pretty thin right now.
Sometimes.
If we add another, bunch of meetings and 10% more work, is that even reasonable?
I mean, a lot of the recommendations are about adding resources, they're not actually, it's not reducing cost necessarily, it's
Yeah.
adding resources to
Right.
make the function more efficient, but there's not actual cost savings in a lot of cases.
Right.
So you're not wrong.
But if we're adding resources in a time in which we don't even have the money to fund
Right.
our current resource,
Yeah, we're not going to add resources.
Right.
It's an efficiency lost.
But I suspect based on Dempster's recommendation, if we had internal auditor who would have somewhat of independent operating range, he or she would probably or likely pay for himself by implementing things,
following through.
following through. And thank God public entities are public. So they can research what other cities are doing too.
Yeah, and I know the city of Portland has an auditor, Metro has an auditor. State has auditors.
Yes.
So it's not
And they can talk with each other.
And talk to operations and follow up, as was
Yeah.
mentioned earlier, make sure.
Well, I know whenever my companies that I work with engage new auditor, it takes auditor months just to figure out
Right.
where the things are.
Right.
So I don't know how much time Moss Adams spend here.
I mean, the nice thing on Moss Adams is this is actually their second 5-year contract, so they've been around for several years.
Okay.
So some of their members,
They've been around. Okay.
I'm familiar, I can refer back to other studies
Yeah.
they've done, That's one nice thing about a long-standing contract.
That helps.
And we work mainly with their government relations section, so they have different sections of their firm, but this particular team that we work more closely with, they do work for cities across.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they pull in people with specific expertise. So like when they did internal controls, they reached out to their audit arm and brought someone in.
But they also not just studies they've done for us, but
Right,
studies
other
they've
cities,
done
yeah.
for others, and they have connections to a lot of other places.
So, as a matter of housekeeping, our goal is that we have a letter that we can approve together before we leave, so that we don't need any more meetings or any more quorums over email.
Can Callie make changes? Can you make
Yeah,
changes to the
so-
letter?
Do you have it?
While we keep
I do.
talking, Ryan, do you mind taking a stab at
Yeah.
adding something to 7? Give you a few minutes for that and then
Oh, do you want me to?
put it out.
Yeah, I do have a draft. I have a draft of what I work with.
Oh, you do? Okay.
I could, let me refresh it based off where we.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan. Any other suggestions for deletions or additions
I
to
have
the
one
letter?
suggestion, number 2 and then 4, City Library. We reference City of Beaverton but I would add that we have not done detailed analysis on other libraries availability in the city of Salem versus Beaverton. I think Salem is very specific where we have Willamette University Library, we have Jamaica Community College, very active library. They all do an interlibrary loan. So I believe in Salem we have access to multiple libraries versus I'm not sure that city of Beaverton does. So that complicates our analysis. So I think we need to state as a note that we have not done detailed analysis to make conclusive recommendation or conclusion.
Okay,
I actually spent some time researching that, and I think I'm on the right path.
so thoughts on, so specifically, what are you proposing, Ernesto?
I'm proposing just that we state that we have not done detailed analysis on availability of other libraries in Salem versus Beaverton, which would change the ratio.
Are you saying we should just delete that parentheses where we compare it to Beaverton?
We don't need to.
I mean,
do
the rest
that.
of the paragraph,
Yeah,
I mean, it's a
I
general
think
statement.
comparison is good, but again, I think it's important to state the differences between two cities.
What I want to be careful of is that we don't insinuate that we did do a
Right.
detailed analysis on anything else.
Exactly, that's
right.
what I'm saying.
And so, but I think that that's kind of the preface that Ryan's additional language says is, we were only able to go this deep.
Okay.
I'm not disagreeing with the sentiment of what you're saying. I would just be careful about saying in that section, we didn't do a detailed analysis here, because what I don't want to imply is that
We
with
did.
fire or police that we did,
Yeah,
because we didn't.
right.
But I also don't want to imply that our citizens don't have sufficient library resources when we have. I'm one who used Jamaica Community College, Willamette University, and so forth.
Mhm.
So I think we need to be careful about blank statements. For example, if you reduce library hours, there's no books for citizens. That's pretty bold statement.
Well, I'm not sure that's what we're saying, though. If you look at the intro to section 2,
Okay.
our primary point is that the city of Salem is doing more with less
Yes.
compared to cities of similar size. We're not saying people can't get books. We're not saying, it's so bad here. We're just saying, as some data to support the idea that compared to other cities, we're doing more with less, but we're not saying it's bad. We're just saying we're doing more with less.
Okay.
But you're proposing, though, that we change number 4 to add that. So thoughts from the committee?
I mean, I think I'm in alignment with what Brian's saying. I think our general point around what number 2 is, we're trying to articulate at a pretty high level that we in the city service level are doing more than our peer groups. And I think that point comes across. I think if we were making a specific recommendation about library related efficiency, I would also have a different frame of reference on that.
Okay, other thoughts?
I agree with that. I'd be inclined to leave it as is.
Okay. Anybody want to change it? We're talking about 2.4. Okay. Motion fails. Sorry, Ernesto.
That's Dallas.
Yeah.
I hope you understand, this is not a disagreement
No,
about,
totally okay.
about this,
Okay.
about the sentiment.
Oh, yeah,
I'm just not sure it's needed
Totally okay.
to be
Yeah.
said there.
I mean, one thing you could do is when you're doing your presentation is emphasize that point overall, is that it wasn't a deep dive into individual
yes.
services.
Yeah.
I mean, that
Looking
could-
at
that could-
other resources
yeah.
that are.
Is
available.
this letter gonna be
Sure.
given to all the city council?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're just gonna be highlighting some of the key points from this letter. So,
Well, that's part of what I wanted to talk
It's
about
both.
today is
Yeah.
Talking.
what do you guys think?
yeah,
Cause I'm obviously not gonna read the letter there.
but they're gonna have already read it.
Hopefully. They got a lot to read every council meeting, so. All right, so noted Ernesto, and I'll make a note.
Thank you.
Okay, other thoughts?
I had a question on C1. I like the paragraph up in A that Dempster added, and then I like everything else. It makes me uncomfortable when we say there is not excessive waste in city government fund operations. Feels like a really big summary statement that
Very confident.
in
Yeah.
4 meetings, there's no way we can say there isn't excessive. I love everything else in that. I think you've done a great job everywhere else. It just makes me uncomfortable seeing the big bold summary statement that there is not excessive waste, because I don't think we're in a position to make that bold
Sorry, where
statement.
are you,
The
Brad?
very first.
C1.
Could it say this,
the
CEC did not identify excessive waste?
Yeah, see something like that. Yeah, and then
What'd you say, Eric?
The CEC did not identify excessive waste in city
in
general fund operations.
time and resources given, we didn't.
I would almost categorize it as we didn't find large buckets of excessive
Right,
waste.
Yeah.
right.
Because
So you've already-
I think that's a bit of a distinction because
Yeah, I like that
I
better
don't know.
too.
For some reason, when I agree with what you're saying, Brian, I just think we did not find excessive waste. Well, there very well could be, but at the
Right.
buckets we were reviewing,
And if our target
it wasn't
was trying
made
to find
obvious to us. that
$14
there was-
million. We didn't find $14 million in excessive waste kind of thing. Like we were at a pretty high level.
Uh,
And then
everybody
the
aligned with,
top line
with
up there
that,
too.
with that adjustment conceptually.
So what,
Do you have a specific sentence you'd like to switch it to?
I know that's what I was trying to think about. What
Okay, in the time, so
what
the
you
second,
said
just
was
go to the
good.
second sentence. Here's what I would recommend. In the time given, the CEC did not find large buckets of waste, basically, or did not find inordinate waste among
Yeah.
the city operations, but you could just eliminate the first sentence, I think.
That's
actually.
kind of what I was asking, is just, it'd be nice to have that
Bucket's a good word.
some sort of a summary, but
Probably not.
No, That's a better word than bucket.
Well, and if we just eliminate
Yeah.
the first sentence, then we don't use the word buckets. So,
So you're saying omit the bold
yeah, and you could just bold the second
and bold the
sentence.
second one?
sure. And then the very top sentence on that page,
Hold on, before we go there.
I guess this is a different font.
And just for process, we're gonna make the changes here, and then you, when there's a motion, it'll just be as amended. Sure. With the discussion today.
So, the change then, if everybody just wants to make sure they're all, on the same page here, we're deleting what is in C1. We're deleting the bolded statement, there is not excessive waste in city general fund operations. And we're gonna make bold the second sentence in the time given. And we're gonna amend to say the CEC did not find inordinate waste among the city operations budgeted within the general fund.
That's,
And you want that one bolded instead.
Yeah, I think for formatting purposes.
Yeah.
Ernesto, were you gonna say something?
Oh, no, I was just
Oh.
going to say, and then can you change the font? I'm just kidding.
He wants Times New Roman.
Please.
I can do whatever.
No, I
No.
was just kidding.
No, she can-
I guess we're looking at it. It's, there it is.
Perfect.
Are we good with that? All right, and then you were gonna go to another
the
spot.
paragraph right above that
As
starts,
mentioned, it's like the preamble.
it's right below B summary.
Oh,
It
yes.
says the CEC finds that there is no significant waste. Again, if we could just make that consistent with. We did not find,
It's the top of the page.
Significant.
Yeah, that one.
yeah.
So
Maybe say the same thing.
in the time given, the CEC did not find that there is significant waste.
Did not find inordinate waste.
Or do you,
What we said?
same thing we said?
And then if we say the same thing, do we need to say it twice? Or is
Well,
that
this
the,
is the summary.
Yeah,
So the
okay.
point of that paragraph is to take everything
Yeah.
below it and
Yeah.
put it in the
I would keep
one
it
small thing.
the same.
Same language.
All right. Anything else, Brian? Or is everybody agreed with those changes? Perfect.
I've got one more, but I don't want to
Go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
over. Okay, 3.1. We highlight PERS. This is the sacred cow, I know, but we talk about these costs make up 80% of the general fund. That's all wages, benefits, compensation, that's everything. Just PERS, as I said last time, as I look at everything, it's 33% of the compensation of the wages currently.
So Todd ran the calculation, so did I. It's
Okay.
you know, depending on the year, like 24 was 19.7, and this year is
But that's of the total general fund.
That's just personal services, just all wages and benefits.
That's a percent, okay.
I think you're just doing percentage of salary.
I was doing percentages of wages, yeah.
And Josh was including all
All the general fund
salary,
budget.
well, no,
As I say, are you looking at it?
salaries and benefits?
So the way I read this is, you know, the greatest expense in the city's general fund budget by far are salaries, wages, and benefits.
Right,
So that
which is
encompasses
80%.
quite a few things.
Yeah.
So 19% of salaries, wages, and benefits is PERS.
Okay, I'll think, I say, I get 33%,
Of salaries.
yeah. And you can,
It's just.
How do we want to describe it?
right,
So if
and
you-
this is a PERS bullet, this isn't. a
Yeah, so-
General
So
compensation.
I mean, I
bullet.
included like health benefits and
Right.
everything else, so all personal services.
Yeah. Yeah, I just took a look at the PERS divided by the wages,
Yeah.
and that's,
And even that's a bit of a challenge because for salaries and wages, the PERS is calculated off of direct compensation. So it's salaries and wages, overtime, incentives.
right, and that's what I added all that
Okay.
for the wages.
So the more overtime, the more PERS cost, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a rate. So I
Or
would
is it,
say your
or is it
number.
better to look at the PERS contribution rate? You know, like that I said, so it went from 10.3 as an average for 28 years, something like that. And now it's up to 30%. I mean, is that a better way to identify that PERS is this ticking time bomb that
It's getting worse.
is getting worse and eating up an inordinate amount of the
Yeah,
budget?
Or is it
how-
not? Because I would say as this population is aging, the PERS beneficiaries, the liability should go down. Do you got
It will eventually. Yeah.
It may
2037.
take a while.
2037 is what,
37, yeah.
Yeah.
and the PERS, I looked at the PERS annual report too, and it says the same thing, that
Yeah. I
it's
think,
not gonna peak anytime soon, I don't think
Yeah.
either.
I mean, what I found, so when I pulled the
Yeah.
calculation of the 19%, you know, like
Yeah.
back in 2011, it was about 11%. So
Right.
going from 11% to 19%, you know, within a 15-year time frame is very significant. It just depends how you want to describe it.
That feels more significant. I'll say
Yeah.
this, when it was 30%, this felt more
Like,
compelling.
yeah.
19% is a thing, but not as
Well,
like,
and that's the
oh
thing, I
my
looked at
gosh,
that.
this is egregious.
And it might be 19% of the whole budget. But I don't think that's at least the point that I was looking at. What I was looking at was the contribution rate and the percentage of the budget that it's eating up every year, and it's growing, and the city can't do anything about it.
So we
Right
can
now.
just reflect the range of contribution rates if that works. So
Mhm.
from OPSRP to tier 1, 2, police and fire,
Mhm.
we can reflect that. And if it's okay, we can just say, hey, here was the rate, you
Right.
know, at what time do you want to pick? And here's the rate now.
I
Because
think
I think
that might
that's
be a better,
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
It's just, how do we want to define it?
right.
Okay, so wording, we got 25 minutes.
I mean, how much do we want to?
So, I mean, you could go like 10 years ago if you want to talk about the contribution rate. It just kind of depends how you want to.
Say, what's the,
Do you have that available?
I put that, yeah, it's right there. That's what I got off the PERS website.
I can pull up the actual Salem. the
Yeah,
Salem-
and that's the, yeah. Salem's was 16% in 2016, and then jumped to
For which
21.
tier?
There's a
The top one.
other
the base.
most expensive.
I was kind of, I mean, that's a get into the weeds. I was kind of surprised there wasn't more of a range. OPSRP was only like 3 or 4% lower than the tier 1.
So the thing that's confusing about that is, so they apply the unfunded liability for tiers 1, 2 across all the rates,
what I
right?
was
So
worried
that's
about,
why.
yeah.
it-
So they're paying the burden for,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, the normal cost is, there's a pretty significant
Right.
difference.
Okay,
How you allocating the overhead essentially.
yes, exactly.
So like, you wanna do 10 years? So like we could look at the rates for
Yeah.
2026, we just saw a big jump. So I
That's
mean,
already right.
so we could go 2016 to 2026.
Yeah.
That's where we're going. Changes to start 7/1 this year.
Right. And that's for 2 years.
Yep.
And then it'll be 35% in 2 years, and then. I just think that's a huge
So are we
reality that the city's
talking-
dealing with, where they're being forced to add significantly more wage or benefits to the same.
So are we talking about swapping out the third sentence for whatever we insert now in 3.1?
I think we take the first sentence out. If the bullet point is PERS, we don't need to talk about salaries, wages, and benefits, do we?
Well,
I would just
the
move-
connection is that the fact is that
I think we do.
4/5 of the budget is associated with
People, right?
people, and
right.
PERS is this
Mhm.
massive chunk.
And see, that's
of
what I
it.
was trying to get to, that
Right.
percentage of the compensation is huge,
Not
but
to
there's a
complicate
different
the edits,
ways
but
to look at that.
Could you just move that first sentence to number 2, compensation and benefits,
That's a good idea.
and then just make them separate points?
Great.
Which is the first two sentences.
First two sentences.
Two, I think,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
Callie, are you tracking?
Nice job, Michael.
I'm trying.
So then for the PERS, we're gonna say that. I don't know how you say it, the state mandated contribution rate has risen from 16% to 30% over the last 10 years.
Yeah, I think, so 10 years isn't gonna be quite as impactful, so our rates in,
15 years would be better.
it would be, but, you can pick
10
whatever.
or 10 or 11, well, but, and that's where I looked at, I mean, for 38 years, the average was 10.3%.
Oh.
And then you can look at the charts, I mean, then it just. Enough of the tier 1 people started retiring, and now we're chasing a big snowball rolling down the hill very fast. I don't know, it just,
Could you please include that?
it's
metaphor?
scary, it's, yeah.
Snowball, somewhere in the sentence, got it.
Rolling down the hill.
You can quote Warren Buffett on that one.
Right.
He was the one that threw the snowball.
Snowball effect leading to avalanche.
Okay, this is what I have so far. The state mandated contribution rate for PERS increased from,
So in. I'm just making sure they're not advisory rates, they're real.
Started jumping up in 03, oh no, in 15. It was 10.6, or I guess you get the same specific.
For anybody else who is planning on proposing edits,
Yeah,
and I'm not being facetious here, just if you could be thinking about what your wording is, I really want to try to honor our time and staff's time today. So, if you have something, just be thinking about how you might say it.
Josh, I sent you our rates, actually. We answered this to the budget committee. And so I sent an attachment to you.
Thank you.
Nice having the voices.
just thinking, wow, what else can we ask? Is that AI? Is that your Salem AI?
This is Salem GPT.
Wow, that's
She has a nice voice.
Amazing.
cool room.
You did appreciate that.
Yeah.
Dude.
Can you send us $14 million?
So in
Can't do
20
that, unfortunately.
Wow, it works.
That sounds like a Siri answer for sure.
That's great.
So I think we're seeing. So 2020. I mean, one challenge is if you remember the Morrow decision, so the PERS rates were artificially lowered based on, the legislature tried to make some changes and they were overturned. So we see a little like bump where they go down and then back up. So 10,
Was that
11.
back in 07?
So that was
Yeah.
like 10, 11, 12, 13, and then they bumped
Okay.
back up. So like for 10-11, it ranges from 6 to 7% of direct compensation. Whereas we saw a huge jump in 2014-15 when those were overturned and they were back in, because then it ranged from 9 to 13%. Of course, now we're going from 24 to 30%. So it just depends which one you want to.
Can we just generally categorize it as,
First cost continued to increase and are now up to 30%.
yeah,
Yeah.
Whatever the actual number is on there.
Okay.
Now I have it in front of me.
I mean, could we say it, as recently as pick whatever date, 2008 or whatever, the PERS rate was that 10, 11,
Or say
12%.
it tripled in the last 15 years.
Yeah, it's
Trended sharply to now being
Tripled
30%.
down.
Great idea.
Okay,
One cent.
no, that sounds good.
You got that?
No, I don't.
As recently as 2008, the rates range from 8.65 to 12.23.
Yeah,
8.65
Figure out.
to 0.23.
Compared to the rates for fiscal year 2026, ranging from 24.02 to 30.29.
30.
if the city council wants to dig into that number while I'm with them, I'm turning to you, Josh.
They probably already heard
Can you,
that.
Yeah.
can you just say, like, when you get rid of that next sentence, just say this upward trend, because I like
Yes.
that upward trend,
Yes.
is an inordinate burden, instead of saying that.
Yep. Good idea.
Yep, that's great.
Okay, so this
Yeah.
one says the state
Better.
mandated contribution rate for PERS
Yes. Thank you for
rate.
indulging.
No, that's not
I
indulgent.
mean, I think that's a
That's-
huge
No, this
piece
is,
of what
this is better than
you're
where it
dealing
ended,
with.
because the 19%, it
It
fell a
does,
little
yeah.
flat.
Yeah.
I did enjoy the 30% number. I just couldn't quite get there. so-
Well, I don't want to say anything that's not true.
Say,
so.
I'd be interested in you looking, double checking my spreadsheets.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I wasn't sure.
I
how it
double
was
checked it again
defined,
this
so
morning,
yeah.
right?
That's why we haven't.
Yeah, I just based it on what the wording was, the salaries, wages, and benefits.
Right,
Mhm,
right.
mhm.
All right,
thank you for that.
everybody agreeable with that change? Okay. Any other proposed modifications? Okay, not hearing any. Should we proceed to take a look
I have
at?
that one sentence.
Oh, you've got, that's right, you've got your,
For the internal or continuing performance audits.
Yeah, just at the end of that paragraph.
7? Is it 7?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, let me just read it and then you can type it if we agree on it. So we recognize the value in conducting performance audits to identify potential efficiencies and recommend the city continue these engagements. Additionally, the city may find greater value in having an internal auditor to staff who is able to conduct more frequent and thorough audits to identify additional efficiencies. So that works.
Yep. That's me.
You might need it. Perfect.
Yeah.
Anybody opposed to those additions?
I thought we recommended adding the internal person.
Yeah, that's. what
That's the
gonna
second
do.
It's
sentence,
coming.
yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, I struggle with these studies, but it looks majority does not, so I yield.
Would you like me to note that on the chair?
You don't have to, who am I to say? You know, it looks at majority is okay. And I see
Why do you
potential.
struggle with?
Just because we don't have money.
Mhm.
Again, if I don't pay my mortgage, I don't invite housekeeper to clean the house, I clean it myself. As simple as that.
Mhm.
So not complicated things.
I would say another analogy is if there's mold in my walls, I don't try to take care of it,
That's a great point.
right? I'm gonna call somebody who's an expert on mold
Yeah.
or the clog in the toilet or whatever that I may not know how to do.
Yeah.
And so there's a balance there,
Yeah.
right? You can't call in external forces for everything.
But these guys are pros. I mean, look our CFO, amazing guy.
Mhm.
I mean, they're pros. It's not like they're volunteers that need audit to tell them what to do.
Yeah.
Back to you, Brian.
I yield, uncle.
I really like the idea, if you had somebody internal, you can have follow-up.
Yeah, I think
I
that's.
think
key.
That's
follow-up
so
is
important,
Probably.
because
Yeah.
they could do a study
Yes.
and then nothing happens.
Should we add that?
But you
in?
haven't.
For a variety of
I do,
reasons.
Kelly, I
Yeah,
think
I
so.
think
I
that's-
think something about implementation. Or, yeah, whatever. Yeah, that's great. Should we go through all of the changes and just make sure we're all aligned? Or do we feel like we're
good.
there?
I think we went through them on the way.
I would move a motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion to approve as amended today. Any second?
Second,
Second.
Phoebe.
All of us.
All in favor?
And
Any opposed? Okay, we did it. We can adjourn. I wouldn't mind though hearing any recommendations on how, well, first of all, who wants to come with me?
Oh, when is it? 'Cause
I actually will be there. I'll be there.
Okay, great.
say, what's the
When-
date?
February 24th.
Yeah, I'll come.
If I can, I will come.
I mean, I'd love to.
What time is it?
6 p.m.
So it starts at 6. It looks like a pretty lengthy agenda, so I mean, it could be later into the evening when it actually comes about, because it's toward the end.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So like, will the meeting be like
Sweet.
6 to 9, 6 to 8?
Let's see. I mean, I would expect it to go at least till 8 o'clock.
But we don't have to stay there, right?
Mm.
We'll be as efficient as possible.
Yes.
Yes, thank you,
absolutely.
Mayor.
Yeah.
There is a small item on the agenda that night.
Just, yeah.
A lot of it depends on public testimony and how many people come to speak. So it's really hard to gauge at this point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll be there to support you, Brian. As many of
Yeah,
us as can get,
yes.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Anything in particular you want me to highlight? I think what's that?
What are the mayor's thoughts on? I think she wants us to highlight the report. I don't know.
Oh, no, I thoroughly enjoyed your,
Wordsmithing?
yeah. Kind of fun surgery to come out.
It did feel like.
That would be too generous.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it.
It's just a really good recipe for making lasagna. Ready to put together. There you go.
I'll say probably, maybe just a little. I'll probably just go to the summary, which is 3 or 4 sentences long, and say, I'm happy to take any specific questions based on what you reviewed in the report. And try to speak on behalf of the committee as best as I can, recognizing that there were multiple viewpoints on multiple things, and Ernesto objected to everything that we said.
That's the vice chair's role.
Story of my life.
Not sure there any.
There certainly could be, if you'd like there to be.
Visuals in there.
That's a good idea.
At the risk of objecting, there will be public there too. So if I was you, I would probably read one sentence from each paragraph, so the public can get what we're trying to get to.
We can,
Right. Maybe PowerPoint.
we can try to distill it down into a PowerPoint, and we can give it to you and you can edit it however you like.
Yeah, I guess if you don't mind, Mayor, having the benefit of you here right now, I guess the question is, what is the expectation of the council in terms of what we do that night? Is it, we provide this letter is gonna be, what, 4.5 pages long? Which to me means not reading it that night, but course, happy to do what you think is best. Just trying to take the temperature on the expectation. Is it, you've received the letter, I'm here to respond to any questions you have, or would you like a more,
How long would it take to read it?
7 to 10.
yeah, I was gonna say 10, I was gonna say 10 minutes. maybe.
Yeah. I think for all the work that you've done, my personal opinion, it's worth drinking publicly. It's not a-
Maybe if we had some slides to go through it at the same time.
I mean,
What
perhaps,
do you think, Jen?
I mean, perhaps not verbatim, but you could have slides that outline each section, to walk you through it, and make sure you have all the points.
I think, yeah, not necessarily every word, but to give people the visual representation of the work that you've done and how much you put into it.
Cover all the content.
And all the content is not verbatim
Got it. Thank you.
and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you've got some good bullet points that you can pull out of here.
So
ChatGPT.
for starters,
That's what I was gonna
so
say.
is
Seriously, yeah, yeah.
is that something I could rely on staff to prepare?
Yeah,
Um,
enough time.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Yeah, seriously.
Salem GPT.
Wow.
For starters, I guess what I would just suggest, and then we can tweak it a little bit, maybe summarize the process. I would probably put the summary maybe in full on a slide. What do you think?
We can work it out.
That summary, did it get bigger though? The summary did get bigger today.
Do you want me to scroll?
Not much.
I mean, if it's gonna be a slide of, 4-point font on a,
It's not bad.
We'll just break it up into bullet points and you can
Yeah.
decide if you want to
Okay.
change it around.
and you could take, I guess what I'm thinking is you could take the bolded items throughout the letter and that could be a starting point, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely.
All right. Any other questions or thoughts before we adjourn? Madam Mayor, anything else?
Can I add, take a minute and thank you so much for giving your time and being so generous with the process, and we, the city, very much appreciate everything that you've done. So thank you for the good work.
I was actually going to say, I really appreciate you guys, the city staff,
Absolutely.
your professionalism,
Yes.
your patience. You're working together with us, and that extends to Keith Staley too, if you talk with him. So my appreciation for you is great.
Yes. Very much.
Happy to do it.
Believe it or not, it was an enjoyable process.
Kind of sad that it's over, but I'm not sure how it would keep going, but yeah, it's been a good eye-opening experience and great to meet all of you guys and see what city staff's doing. Welcome to the new role.
Yes. Awesome.